Yeah, how's it going? Today is 25th of February, Sunday, and we are taking a look at the market and everything what's happening on Sundays and every weekend. I'll try to take a look at finance side. In my previous video, I was taking a look at NATO, so that would be alliance and overall expenditure, which should be about 2% of all alliance members' expenditure on defense, right? While we take a look at alliance members of what might as well, let's take a look at the U.S. and everything, what's happening with the U.S. and let's take a look at finances, right? And we can begin there with some of the articles that I like to take a look at. We can follow a timeline and let's start perhaps not on the best things that happen in the world and progress in perhaps some of the changes happening, right? The first one that would be something that we're looking to understand how U.S. is allocating finance when it comes to military expenditure. And let's try to understand it. It was brought to our attention, right, that EU expenditure on military, right, and everything was happening in EU. So while we're taking a look at EU and some of the countries, let's begin by taking a look at perhaps even US and US expenditure, right? And something that happened on 9/11, right? But let's begin by taking a look at this article. Now, the US government did not mysteriously lose trillions of dollars the day of 9/11. Let's try to delve a little bit deeper in this article. From there, let's progress according to the timeline and how U.S. is taking a look at some of the expenditure, how finance has been allocated within U.S. first. By the way, I haven't read this article. I haven't, so I thought it might as well that would be timestamps, right? I don't know if it's accurate. I don't know nothing. I'll be reading this article for the first time, and I'll be trying to understand what happened when it comes to perhaps money being allocated and where that money was allocated, how money was used, and if there is any documents that we can pull up and take a look at about expenditure. What's happening, right? Claim the U.S. government mysteriously lost trillions of dollars the day before attacks of September 11, 2021. So it's something that happened 23 years ago, right? So freedom of information 10 years ago or so, perhaps, unless some of the documents might be classified, so not necessarily would be able to pull those documents, right? But either way. So there is an article, right, where I'm taking this information from. Assessment falls that a long circulating claim misrepresenting remarks about 2.3 trillion. Back then, 2.3, that was 23 years ago, meant way more money. But either way, 2.3 trillion accounts entries that officials at the time said were insufficiently documented because of the outstanding technology entries were made during fiscal year 1999 and detailed in the early 2000s report. The fact, more than 2 decades after 9/11 attacks, false claims and conspiracy theories about the events continue to surface online. One of the meme being shared ahead of the 22-year university reporting debunked. Okay, so they referring to the misconstruction, right? So what we're trying to understand, as I mentioned, I haven't read this article, right? So what we're trying to understand, accounts, right? So they're saying perhaps it's true, perhaps it's false. We're trying to understand accounts, finance, and how money was given. We're looking at 2%. If the US is spending 2% on its military, that's something I'm looking to understand only, nothing else. Let's take a look at next article, right? I was taking a look at accountants within the US, and I was taking a look at some feedback about how much millions were spent on those accountants, and those accountants over many months trying to put all the accounting together and trying to find all the numbers. So I have done a little bit of research to try to understand it. And as of now, I don't think that they have managed. Now, this is something that's happened to this year. Since that date, 2021, that period was constantly repeating, and now we are to the point while we're trying to understand 2% and how those 2% of finance within the US is being allocated. Since US have started, right, about EU not allocating 2%, let's take a look at US allocating 2% and Pentagon falls sixth audit with number of passing grades stagnant. So it's this article that I'll be reading is published last year, November 16th. So it keeps falling. So have they allocated 2%? That's what I'm trying to understand. If yes, where are their accounts? Let's take a look at this article. Again, I will be reading this article for the first time. What I'm trying to understand, 2%, right? So 2%, if US allocating 2% of its GDP to defense, have it done it? And if yes, perhaps we need to take a look at accounts. We need to take a look at the proof. That's very common sense. Washington, for a sixth year in a row, the Pentagon, which is government institution, right, falls its annual audit, right? Government falls. So the same government who is asking as of now EU to perform up to the standard, which is very reasonable, very reasonable. So while we take a look at EU and holding EU accountable, let's take a look at US, and perhaps there's something with the 2%. The results is not a surprise. Department of Defense is not surprised. What you mean? This should be very important. The Department of Defense assess vast and okay, so that's excuse. They have so many assets. Decentralized. Okay. So decentralized. So. So we're not holding them accountable. That's why I'm saying we're holding the EU accountable, but we're not holding decentralized. Amounting to 3.8 trillion alongside 4 trillion in liabilities. They are located in all 50 states. More than they spend so many millions. They have have hired best auditors to do all the things. They have hired best of the people to keep track of all the assets. They have done it. 6 years they have done it, and they haven't done it properly. That's what's really happening. More than they're saying it's a massive task. They have spent. Take a look at accounts of how much they spend and performing those audits. You can, for people who are interested, they can take a look at that information, and if they're actually spending 2%, that's why I like the question. If based on this information, if US did not spend 2%, what they would say? They would say that we spend way more. We just cannot count all the money. But since the Pentagon began audit itself, Pentagon was forced. I think it was by Congress, right? Congress implemented that Pentagon would gonna have to start based off a lash from the public, right? So begin auditing itself in 2018, the last department to do so after Congress required the practice across the government in 1990s. So this is when it was requirement, and as of now, they haven't accomplished that. So 34 years later, 34 years. So only interested 2%, right? It's solved some of its ESS accounting problems. Now change each year in more incremental. If there is a change at all, that's last year audit only rated 7 of the nearly 30 sub audits as clean. This year, 2 were 7. One other was rated as qualified. The next step down in accounting jargon, 3 more audits were still ongoing. The remaining 18 were given falling grades. And this is the people who asking Europe to pick up its bill. Pentagon officials have tried to ensure the public there is a progress despite the same top-line rating. Speaking to reports this week, Controller, there's a name, let's skip names, the first moment towards resolving fund balance with the Treasury Department, meaning that 2 departments are getting closer to matching their ledgers. This consistency helps prevent fraud. I don't know. What I'm saying is we can progress, right? But I don't want to. I think it's beaten. I have beaten this one. I don't think they're spending 2%. If you would ask me, they don't. Perhaps within 34 years, then it was required by the government. They could perhaps begin performing up to the standard. let's take a look at this article, right? So let's finish on this article. There's something perhaps to celebrate, right? It's something that was released yesterday, right? So Marine Corps became the first military branch to pass financial audit. Alas. So okay. So let's try to. I haven't read it, by the way. So at least they might have some functional departments when it comes to military defense, right? So let's read it and let's try to understand. It's something that was published yesterday and was first, so perhaps there might be some progress, right, when it comes to military spending and or understanding how funds been allocated, right? The Marine Corps this week became first military branch ever to pass complete financial audit. A Defense Department official confirmed Friday having successfully accounted for more than $46.3 billion in assets and making the end of 2 year effort. So it have taken some time, right? But at least there's something that was released yesterday. Independent accountant contractor by the Department of the Defense Department issue an unmodified option. Okay. There's a lingo. Perhaps it means something to someone from accounting, but either way, all the Marine Corps physical 2023 financial statement, meaning the information given was correct as can be proven, the service said. Okay. Given was correct as can be proven. Interesting. But either way, there might be a lot of when it comes to accounting, right? So there's not necessarily would be everything covered with these two sentences, right? Or so to say, right? So because there might be a lot of liabilities, ongoing things, and everything was happening, right? But either way, let's give more credit, right? At least making some progress, right? I know that something's wrong. I don't know what exactly is wrong, but it says within this article, right, for people to understand it, something's wrong. But either way, in 2017, the Marine Corps became the first military service within the Defense Department to undergo the full financial audit, which at the time means sifting through more than 4,300 sample items and 30,000 documents. What they're saying, they need to rationalize why 34 years they couldn't accomplish with all the hundreds of millions been spent on those accounting services to do these audits. There's more to it. There's definitely more to it. They're not looking to share that information with either way. Verifying similar items in 2012, a limited audit included a trip to Afghanistan. Ultimately, the service fall due past either previous attempts, right? They will begin this article by saying how big of the task it was. But let's keep all that. How big of the task? This year, primary audit resulted found that the Marine Corps reduced unsupported. Okay, that's very important. Every word I haven't read it, by the way, but I think it's very important to understand this part. I would just hope that if as of now, U.S. haven't, perhaps in the future, U.S. would begin by holding themselves accountable, and public, if this department can't, perhaps public would hold its military complex accountable to perhaps where is the 2%. How those 2% been allocated first. From there, let's progress to Europe, alright? But either way, this year's primary audit result that found that the Marine Corps reduced unsupported. Well, here we go. So there's a lot of people not held up accountable. Ooh. On distributed transactions from 2.2 billion in October 2022 to less than $500,000 in March 2023, thereby supporting. Okay, so there's some progress there. Whereas the people who are holding, I don't know if everyone got that. So people begin starting to be held accountable. More effective leadership decisions. Here you go. Chief Financial Officer of Defense Department said in press release. Great. So at least US making some progress, right? The way how this article is written, right? I get the author of this article. I get it, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. How I should read it, the entire article. But I know exactly what's happening. Since I know it, I don't know if I should finish on that on a strong point, or should I keep reading this article. The strong point was let's begin by getting your own things in order, and from there progress into perhaps taking a look at Europe. Right. That's the point that I was making. I can share some additional information on if it's something you can do your own research instead of perhaps reading some of those articles. Try to do your own research, and from there we can progress in how money's been allocated and how much finances they had and where the money was paid and how much money was paid. All of that is missing.